1972, law enforcement's main target, as far as the Lucchese family, was naturally its boss, Carmine Tremonti, who became the official boss after the death of Tommy Lucchese in 1967. Some believe Tremonti was only warming the seat for Tony Ducks Carollo, who was under indictment in December 1967, a case that he would ultimately be convicted of in June the following year and sentenced to 3 years. Following Carollo's release, he did assume control of the Lucchese family. In and around 1967, the Lucchese's acting consigliere was Paul Vario, who was a Brooklyn-based captain with a large crew situated mainly in the Canarsie section of Brooklyn. Vario was considered powerful in his own right, and more so with his new administration position. In December 1971, a large-scale investigation was underway targeting organized crime. The police department had one of its officers, disguised as a Christmas tree seller, who opened a shop across the street from a Brooklyn bar that doubled as a mob hangout. Over time, the investigation refocused on a junkyard at 5702 Avenue D in Canarsie, called the Bargain Auto Parts, a business owned by Norris Rubin. But more importantly, a trailer on the property was headquarters for Vario and his crew. I've heard about the trailer at the junkyard, but this was way before my time. In fact, when this story took place in 1972, I was only 3 years old. In the history of the mob, I've noticed that besides social clubs, law enforcement for some reason always seemed to target junkyards. But this particular trailer had a great deal of criminal activity taking place in and around it. The Vario crew were known as big earners, so it's not surprising. The investigation entailed an undercover officer, Detective Douglas Levine, to infiltrate the crew at the junkyard. On 30 separate occasions, Levine visited the trailer where he provided false tips in return for $450 in bribes, and as further payoff, he had free entry into a Queens nightclub, where he was instructed to mention the name Charlie at the door, an alleged code name for Vario, which was common practice back then. For instance, anyone being sent by Vario would mention a name that the bouncers would know meant to let that person or people in free of charge. Levine was not the only member of law enforcement frequenting the trailer. There were local cops on the Vario crew's payroll, who mainly protected Lucchese gambling dens from being raided. Vario once admitted to a wired Detective Levine how careful he was about getting recorded, even to the point of not installing a telephone in his house for the past 6 years at the time of the conversation. Vario lived at 9512 Flatlands Avenue in Canarsie, Brooklyn. Most old-timers understood that the telephone was their enemy. The Title III Wiretap Act, put into effect in 1968, allowed the interception of conversations and was an essential weapon for law enforcement. However, if you took Paul Vario as an example, he lived without a telephone in his house for 6 years. Imagine what that was like for his wife and kids. But even with those drastic measures, he was still recorded by an undercover, boasting about how careful he was. Not long after that conversation with Levine, Vario gave the detective a $100 down payment on a $1,000 bribe for the name of an informant. The date Levine was supposed to hand over the informant's name coincides with a major event that took place, which I'll speak about in a moment. Detective Levine was said to have studied the people or targets that he was dealing with and learned what would be appealing to them. For instance, he once supplied Vario with a list of guys who were recently arrested at a Brooklyn crap game. The staff at the district attorney's office added items such as arrows and asterisks next to the names just for added flair. So when he showed Vario the list with the added notations, Vario told him, "Sure, I see the significance of this," when in actuality, there was none. As the investigation into Vario and his crew developed, law enforcement camped out across the street from the junkyard at the Nazareth High School. On April 7, 1972, the Brooklyn District Attorney Eugene Gold had a micro-sync 25 transmitter covertly installed in the ceiling of Vario's trailer. The device became known as the Gold Bug. In addition, telephone wiretaps were used, and all 3 phones in the trailer were being monitored. Video surveillance was taken, as well as 54,000 surveillance photos, all of which provided a wide range of crimes committed by the crew, such as the sale of narcotics, extortion, loan sharking, bookmaking, the number business, assaults, robberies, burglaries, counterfeiting, hijacking, stolen property, forgery, possession and sale of weapons, labor racketeering, where a list of 200 businesses were infiltrated or taken over, stolen car rings, possession of untaxed cigarettes, insurance fraud, arson, chop shops for cars and boats, and prostitution. The bug also revealed that policemen were on the take, including a police lieutenant, most of whom were relieved from their jobs or charged. Nevertheless, Vario and his crew were eventually tipped off about the telephone taps, but not the gold bug. Consequently, over 12,000 policemen spread out throughout New York City, serving over 600 subpoenas on members and associates of organized crime. Those subpoenaed basically had three options. The first being talk and chance getting killed, talk but lie and face perjury charges, or refuse to speak after being offered immunity and be charged with contempt. Naturally, some talked, some lied, and the majority received contempt charges. On October 16, 1972, 2 busloads of news, radio, and TV reporters followed District Attorney Gold, who traveled in his own car, to the Bargain Auto Parts junkyard. Gold gave the group a personal tour of Vario's 2-room trailer that was naturally empty at the time. In fact, Gold actually pulled the trailer ceiling down and removed the hidden bug to show the reporters. As I mentioned earlier, it was on that same day that Detective Levine was supposed to hand over the name of the informant to Vario. Obviously, this never took place. If you haven't liked this video yet, please do, as it helps with YouTube's algorithm. Also, if anyone would like to show their appreciation for videos like this, you can do so by donating with the Super Thanks icon down below or through the PayPal Cash App links in the video's description.
District Attorney Gold is calling it the most massive investigation in the country. For more than a year, law enforcement officials searched for the summit, and he says they found it here in a lowly auto wrecking yard in the Canarsie section of Brooklyn.
This is the trailer, which was the summit meeting place of the organized crime figures throughout New York City, Nassau, Suffolk, Westchester, and Rockland counties.
Hey, watch yourself.
Here's the bug.
Watch yourself. Watch it.
How did you get it in here?
I get that mic, huh?
Mr. Gold,
Here's the bug.
how did you get it in here?
No comment. That was quite a task.
Could you have gotten these subpoenas issued without the use of this bug and electronic
Without the
surveillance?
use of this bug, this investigation couldn't have gone nearly as far as we did.
Paul Vario faced a multitude of indictments following the bug incident for crimes such as witness tampering, insurance fraud, bribery regarding Detective Levine, tax evasion, but even facing all those charges, he was still released from prison by 1975, where he was placed in an underboss position.